Hey, ladies and gentlemen, my name's Shay from Earth Heroes TV, and today I'm joined with Jason Reynolds, again from the Quantum Movement and the Present Moment Project. Excited to be here with you, Jason. Thanks for joining me, mate. Absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Shay. Thanks for having me. I love that intro, mate. That's a very, looks stunning.
Yeah, thanks, mate. I love exploring and playing with the sacred geometric forms that are part of life and the movement of life as we know it in that sacred pattern. And I feel that's often a really nice invitation into exploring how those patterns of life are interrelated into, you know, our own patterns, our psychological patterns, our behavioral patterns, our movement patterns. And I'm really keen to explore that with you today around, you know, not just our patterns, but observing our patterns in the present moment and exploring that concept of what is the present moment and what are we, you know, are we just made up of fractal patterns, or are we something else, something more potentially? I don't know. But before we jump into that, I just wanted to thank those who are joining in and watching live right now. I also wanted to invite you guys to be part of the conversation as well. Although Jason and I are on the screen, you guys are very much a part of this conversation. So I just wanted to invite you to drop a comment and let us know where you're tuning in from. We'd love to hear from you if you have any questions as well that you would like discussed in this conversation, where we really explore human being and humankind and human evolution, ultimately exploring all these beautiful concepts that we get to be part of in this movement. We are, you know, living, breathing, soul-infused conscious beings, and we're just opening up that conversation is what does that really mean? So if you think you know what it means for you, please just drop it in the comment section. We'd love to hear from you. And if you also love this conversation, please, you know, you're welcome to share it with your friends. But otherwise, let's jump into it. Jason, how does it feel for you to explore that concept of what are we as a human or fractal images, you know, in this holographic universe?
Yeah, well, I mean, to me, what am I is the first question. And it's not a question that many of us have had the, I suppose, the grace or the space to actually go into it. I don't mean that in any other way. That what I've come to understand is that when we feel confident exploring a space, is then we start to discover the beauty of it. And for many of us to be presented with a question like, what am I? Or, you know, what is it that I've become? It requires a real level of trust. And for many of us, we've come to know trust by what it is that we know, or what it is that we know that other people know. And I would say, you know, that the very concept and conscription of knowing, of knowledge, are all really powerful things. But ultimately, they're things that precede being in the present moment. They're things that may lead up to it as far as what we've come to learn or come to experience. But the key is, how do we then bring that experience, and maybe a more ethereal experience, or coming from our imagination or a deeper part of our soul, to then be able to integrate that into a physical state. For many of us, we have a lot of conversations on our page, and asking recently what people saw themselves as, and there was many, return comments about, an energetic being, an individual manifesting on all forms, and an infinite type of response. And I don't doubt that to be true at any point in time. But the key is, how do we then transcend the supposed limitations of the physical state? And for me, this is where knowledge comes in, because the physical is only is a stagnant space. It is only moved and enlivened by the vitality of spirit or energy that exists within us. And for many of us, to the degree that we deny that energetic state, the soul, whatever it may be as we relate to it ourselves, will be to the extent that we put our attention and our expectation upon the physical being. The physical being is magnificent in so many ways by its design and by its deeper reality. But it's inconsequential when you start to consider the very origin of what we are and the energetic state of what we are. And for many of us, that's a as I said, it's an ethereal, it's an assumed, it's something that we fleetingly have an experience with, but rarely are able to maintain a space with. Because I would suggest for many of us, one of the greatest fears is being ostracized, is being alone, is being separated from others, not being accepted. But ultimately, to be alone in its real sense of the word is all one. And to be able to accept that, and when we find an audience or become into concert with our own soul, there is only one. There is only us that is having that experience, from all the beauty and the magnificence that we can have in our own state, which we might often dismiss as such things as a coincidence, or that was interesting, or that was amazing. Those particular experiences are for us, and we dilute those experiences when we try to make someone else understand them. And it's to recognize that deeper relationship that we can achieve by ourselves, with ourselves, in the understanding of what we are, is that we are infinite. How do we translate that into this physical existence that is around us? Now, when we're going back to knowing or knowledge, many of us have placed upon the body these unrealistic expectations. And one of those is to recognize, first of all, we determine the way in which our body, in every function in it, operates and interacts. It is why, from a place of control and organized control, that we are showered with and given specific information from science, from teachers of many forms, from different types of experts and delineations of observance as to how our body works, what it does, what's good for us, what's bad for us. The media is, constantly on, one week red wine's great for us, the next week it's the thing that we should avoid. And there's a state of confusion that's maintained. But the very point of reference here for me is when we understand the magnificence of the body and we stop putting expectations upon it, like to determine and discern wisdom to change form and shape of things around us, we stop finding ourselves in states of stress and overwhelm and frustration. Because for many of us, it's in this knowledge, or what I know to be true, that we become stagnant. And it's everything that we know that determines what we want to control or believe the way that things are. For many of us, we perceive that we've got a brain that actually brings wisdom to us, that has something to do with our intelligence. Our brain is no more than a switching station for the autonomy of the functions of our physical being. Our awareness is something far beyond that. And for many of us, that's a blinding light that we rarely actually go into because we don't understand how to navigate. And just to be summitched by just a little bit of that can be so fulfilling. But if I could, relate it to an experience that when you look into something that is so bright that it is blinding, you become dissolved in that moment because there's nothing else to do, be, or it's in that moment to get a point of reference. And when we are in a space with our own soul, it's very similar to that we're looking straight into the sun. Nothing else exists except to find that point of reference. And at that particular point is when we retreat and we start using our physical capacities to determine our truth. We have intuitions, but we don't act upon it until it becomes a problem. We say, I knew that would happen. We didn't know it would happen. We had that in amongst a whole range of other information, but my inability to be able to trust in that individualized experience with spirit or with energy within us doesn't allow us to explore it. But it's the potency that we experience in moments maybe of meditation or breathing and other practices that we seem fulfilled by, but just taking the scraps of life. So for me, in what am I? I am a marriage between the energetic and the physical, and it's my understanding of how they both exist to support each other as one entity, so they're not separate, that I can then become what I am here to be, to create uniquely and authentically. So when I can let go of all the knowledge, because I trust in my awareness, and knowledge doesn't exist now. Knowledge is a pretense to now. Knowing is a pretense to now. Knowing is a pretense to what may occur in the future. It's a form of control. To be aware and present in this moment and be fully vulnerable and exposed and trust only in what step I take in the moment I take it. That is where we find true wisdom. And that's what I would say. We find true peace in that individualized experience with ourselves. The key is, how do we create at that particular point?
Boom, that's powerful. Beautiful transmission, Jason. And a few things that really stood out to me around, transcending the limits of what we put as our ceilings or our capacity. And you spoke to, the limits that we put on ourselves, holding ourselves back. And for me, it's had to do with, being publicly humiliated, because that's what I experienced when I was young. I always had a fear that I would do something and I would look ridiculous and everyone would laugh at me and I would be totally humiliated. And that I noticed that pattern play out in my life. I prevented myself from speaking my truth or doing anything because there was that underlying fear that was holding me back. And as you said, it wasn't till it came into my awareness that was a pattern for me and where it came from. My question and curiosity lies in exploring this piece of being in the present moment, but being aware of, because we can be aware of our environment and notice what's going on and wow, it's crazy and chaotic and all this stuff is happening and it's out of my control and all these people aren't doing what I want them to do for me and so on and so forth. As opposed to what I'm hearing you express is a suggestion and invitation ultimately for people to really bring that back within to themselves and realize that what is it in my control is having the awareness of my physiology and the magnificence of my capacity to, psychologically understand things, intellectually understand things, intuitively feel into things, and have that deeper sense of awareness moving forward around how my environment is also responding to my abilities to move through this world. And I think that's a really, really quite empowering message that you're sharing. And I'm keen to explore that a little bit deeper as well with you, particularly around these limits ultimately, because, I would be kidding myself if I was to say to everyone, yeah, I'm perfect and I got it all worked out and I know exactly what I'm doing with my life, because ultimately I have no idea. And not to say that I'm making it up every step that I go along. I'm kind of constantly recalibrating and realigning to what feels for me in alignment with what I would like to create in my world, which is what you touched on as being a creator being. And do you think it's relevant, I guess my question, to explore, come aware of what's led us to this point, but then to step in, what does it take to step into the creator for the future? Do we really have to let go of all of those past old programs that aren't serving us anymore?
You're a beautiful man, Shay. I really felt what you're saying. And it's, I think for me, I would agree 100% with you. I mean, I've come to a understanding of, and very practiced understanding of, being at one with myself and in certain spaces, and especially around teaching, especially around holding space and those things that are just eternal within me. But, to analyze my life and to suggest that I would be living any level of perfection or example of everything there is, would not be true. And I think that's something that is to understand that we don't need role models in our life. That there's so many coaches out there that have been, and I've dealt with many of them and just liberated them from the idea that they need to be this perfect example of life before they can provide support and assistance to people. But the very importance is in an individual is to come to recognize their own capacity to direct their own life and to realize that there's nothing to actually change. Ultimately, as we start to see the environment around us change significantly and become more vital and enriched as we accept that in ourselves. Now, when we do that, things change very significantly. What we might want to understand is, as an individual, we are making it up as we go. that's an absolute truth. No one knows what's coming next. No one can determine that for you. Otherwise, you would have this blinding light coming from some part of this plane or planet that we may be living on that is a central determination of absolute and pure wisdom in each and every moment. No one understands what's coming next. And I think coming to that realization is there is nothing I can control going forward except for maybe how I receive what is coming into my life. And for me, one of the greatest things is not about knowledge, but it's space. You know, we look around the world, there is so many opportunities, that there is an uncanny amount of things that we can benefit and prosper from in inordinate ways. But if we see life through the idea of what I have been or what I was or how I compare myself to others, we're going to only see the same things that we've experienced before. And if we keep referencing our knowledge, if we keep referencing our past, we're going to find ourselves in the same way. We can have beautiful awakenings, beautiful ideas that spawn from within us, but then we apply them and action them in the same way that we've actioned things previously. And this beautiful thing just becomes another journey back to the same spot of our own doubt and fear or questioning of ourselves. So with I was listening, there's a lot of questions and a lot of times I wanted to share to that, but it's that I think that the most important part, and for me, what I come to understand is that indulgence and the grace to give ourselves space. And what I mean, you would invest into yourself in such a way of create peace and space in your life to be able to receive significance and prosperity if you believed that that's what was a part of your life and existence. But when we do not believe in ourselves, we start to believe in belief structures. Then we have belief systems, which are again stagnant and control us. Doesn't give us the liberty in each way to act in a particular way because there's a certain moral code, certain ethic code, certain way that society says, well, you can't do that. Well, what do you mean you can't do that? And then suddenly it's like, well, how do we do it here? What are we supposed to do? Rather than actually as an individual being able to go that I am liberated by my ability to choose, but ultimately by my ability to communicate with myself. So the world can tell me anything from any point or pulpit or platform of life. They can do that at any moment. But are they at fault, or is it my ability or inability to consent or engage with that makes them right or wrong, that makes them brilliant or evil? So ultimately, when I think we look at the physical body has been deteriorated and formed to have cancers, formed to have, cysts, judgments that cause us to not do something as simple as sleep of a night, to not be able to express love because there's supposedly a right way of doing that. The very nature of our physical body is just to enjoy the experience of living life as we become a conduit for what is within us. But one true fact is that when we don't accept ourselves, we will seek that acceptance in others. And we will do things, we will dress a particular way, talk a particular way, agree with certain concepts, wear certain colors in order to become into the good graces of someone else. But when we can fulfill ourselves, and it's a simple practice and process, for me, to come into our own space can be as simple as getting a pen and paper and asking yourself questions. I mean, that function is really simple and anyone can do it. And I would say with everything I've learned and that we share, is it's something that anyone can do without any level of expertise. But it's not just getting a pen and paper and writing. The deeper wisdom that can come from that type of practice, for example, is in the subtle differences and the navigation through that. But once you understand it, it's like everything, like I think we were talking about before. Whilst we have a energetic or a spiritual experience with life around us and we're like wowed by that and we're in a state of wonder, that's quite amazing. And then when we come back to our physical space and we go, oh geez, but I just can't do that. it's not until we love the magnificence of our body that we can transcend it. Whilst we maintain a polarization of this spiritual experience or this energetic experience that we aspire to, but we don't love where we're already at, we'll continue to have this separation. The understanding of the physical body and the magnificence of it does not need to be fed by certain things to be sustained. The physical body is just the expression of your soul at any particular point. And where that soul is being suppressed, you'll have disease, you'll have rashes, you'll have mental issues, you'll have all of these other things that as an individual, we can be overwhelmed by, shit, there's so many things I've got to address or I'd like to address or get in order. But those things that seem to impact and affect our life are not real. They are a condition of being disintegrated or disconnected. But if we try to play with those problems or those perceivable challenges or things that we just don't like, we're going to elevate them, we're going to expand them, and they're going to take up a bigger place in our life. And then they become a project, then they become something important, and then they become something stimulating. And we hear people saying, look, I just can't get past that. The very nature is it's kind of like wanting to listen to classical music, but all that's on the radio is heavy metal, and you end up complaining about heavy metal whilst you're listening to it and engaging with it, and you simply don't just turn the dial down and go, I've got to go back to this space, to the music I love, to what sings to me. And that's the same thing. The relationship, and I don't know if I've shared this before in this space, but we have, and I say it significantly, is people that we have shared a simple experience with have overcome any mental or physical condition that is identified as a disease 100% of the time when they access and can maintain a state of integration. The irony is psychology, science, medicine, and a whole range of the pillars, and law is another big one these days. They separate us from our own wisdom. They are insignificant to the relativity of when we are integrated. They have no significance, but they play a big role in our life when we deny ourselves, when we're separate. I don't know what to do. I'm not sure what I should do. Maybe I should ask this person. I've got to get some advice here. Yes, there's aspects of that. Yes, when the world is telling you that you need to wear a mask and you need to hide and you need to stop what you're doing and stop moving, well, you can either take that on or go, well, that's an interesting offer, but it's insignificant to me because my particular offer to myself is from within me and I trust that. So I can look at those things and either observe them and laugh and see them as the entertainment that they are, or otherwise I can become caught up and lack the ability to get back to my center point. And that to me is, we are going to fall over so many times, but falling over is not the problem. But that's what we're complaining about, is I fell over. Falling over is actually a great thing if we just know one thing, how to get back up. So to me, it's not about sharing knowledge. It's not about sharing information. What is the soul and how does that work? And how does that work? What about this? And what about when this occurs? And what about when that happens? The very nature is that when we find peace and integration within ourselves, we create magnificence through businesses. We start to find people that understand what it is that we want to convey, and they suddenly start turning up. We don't, for many of us, we're trying to fix financially, we're trying to fix ourselves in health because we're meeting some idea of some level of expertise outside of ourselves, but it's the very ignorance of ourselves. And what we've conditioned and learned to do is to go to someone else to learn to do what's right or wrong. Whereas for me, that's always been, inauthentic. For me, it's about providing a space for yourself and therefore, by extension, individuals to start to push back against the wall of information that says that we are common, that we have things that are similar. And this is what I do. Is that the same for you? Or I had this sort of visual and image that was coming into me. The great things that exist in this world by decree at the moment are being diluted because people are trying to copy other people that are successful. True success and fulfilling success. I've worked with people in the hundreds of millions and billions and all the rest, and there's some of them are the most broken people because they've put so much into their life to serve others, but they forgot to serve themselves. But yet, for many of us, I feel that's starting to change, and that is becoming such an importance, well beyond anything else. But it comes back down to, and I'll say this forever, it's integration. And as soon as we're integrated, suddenly the cancer becomes dissolved. Suddenly the sleeping just happens. Suddenly the appreciation and love for those people around us just is there. And suddenly the opportunities start arising. And when we realize that, the greatest challenge is to be able to accept that we created it. Just one last thing is we're so easy to accept all the things, and excuse my language, that we fucked up. We're very easy to accept, I did that, that was me, I failed, I did wrong, or I should have done this. Why don't we accept the other side of that and start to even explore that? Because that is where the 99%, and infinitely beyond that, is sitting there dormant and waiting for us to play with it.
Yeah, I love it, Jason. It's so potent. There's so many gold nuggets of wisdom right there that you're sharing. And I hope those of you who are watching have got a pen and paper handy and just writing some of these things, because essentially what I'm hearing, and just what I want to repeat back in my own language, is that everything that we need is within us. It's in each of us. That we're all self-sovereign, self-navigating, self-regulating, self-empowered, and once we become self-accepting of what is being created in our environment that I have contributed based upon my choices and my actions and what I'm aware of in myself, whether it be the ultra successful or those who are just scraping by and struggling on both ends of the spectrum. It's coming to that integrated, the inner is all in the words. I love how you really explore the etymology of how the sound and vibration of words are all interconnected and linked, and knowing that there is a resonance when we go inwards, which the integration has to do with. It's going within me. What am I doing? How am I creating? What am I being? What am I loving? What am I accepting? What are my values? And recognizing my values are just my results of my life. What it is that it's created in my life is where I'm putting my energy and prioritizing. And if I'm in my flow and just naturally allowing things to unravel for me, then that is ultimately what I'm valuing. That's what is going to be created in my environment, like you said, with the opportunities that arise. And I'm really keen to go into this conversation a little bit more with you around, particularly now when we're faced with massive transition and change and opportunity for space to integrate some of the challenges and the confrontation and overcoming the hurdles. We've spent the last couple of years in a massive new society, let's say, and way of being, and we've had plenty of time to integrate some of the messages and the learnings and of the teachings of our life, and get to this point now where potentially some people who are even watching this video right now are realizing, wow, okay, I do want to change my lifestyle, or I do want to change something, or I do just want to change my perspective on what I'm creating in my life, and accepting and appreciating what it is that I do have, rather than living in having everything, all this success, but not really feeling fulfilled, as you mentioned. So just having that shift internally to integrate and have that integrity around navigating moving forward. And so with that opening up, more and more people potentially embarking on new passionate projects that make them come alive and be in their spirit of inspiration and drive for life. What's your experience in moving into this space and just allowing the opportunities to arise? You did mention that takes a level of action taking, but what is it that just can be fully grounded into the physical solid experience that will enable people to trust that everything will be okay and will work out, even more so the more that we let go of all of the limits and the fears and the safety and security of the old that it has offered, but having a more expansive perspective of what is possible for the future to come.
Yeah, just a little question. But yeah, there's I would say, if there's beauty everywhere, but it's how long can we maintain an audience to it? It's how long, when we're in our own bliss, do we then say, oh, I've got to get back to life, or I've got to get back to doing that thing. It's something that I love about having children is they don't care what's got to be done or when it's got to be done. It's just, they just want to have fun, and it's when you allow yourself to come back to being a child, there is nothing to worry about. And you think, that's why I love working with entrepreneurs that really want to make a change in kids is, I know others, but those two specifically, because they do something very different. When we become adults or we become adulted, it is when we become poisoned. And when we become poisoned is when we know and we stop asking questions. We ask questions to a degree, but then we start convincing ourselves. And even at times we start going, oh, how am I going to fix this? And even if that was a legitimate and real question and something that inspired someone, the tone of voice to, how am I going to fix this? Or how am I going to fix this? And being curious to it is a very different scenario. And for many of us, it's, maybe to observe how many empowering questions or any questions that we're asking that are become stagnant because of what we know, because we're turning our questions into statements. Well, we don't have to hear it with the same tone that we may have said it before. Bring curiosity to your questions with a willingness to say, I don't know what the answer is, because show me anyone in the world. And look, I've got a great and well-developed capacity to be able to intuit from a distance, what's going on in someone's body with high accuracy. But to me, that's not special. That's what we can all do. It's just a matter of the bridge is, do we trust what it is we're seeing? As we trust, then we see more. And as we see more, we then start to experience that more. It's not special. It's just where I put my attention. But at the same time, I'm not going to profess to say, I know what's going to happen. I mean, we just made a big investment today into something to change, and it scared the hell out of me. It brought up all of the things within me that were like the reasons why I haven't done that before, because of all the stuff I knew and, not lacking my own humility into just going, you know what, I know all this stuff, but there's no movement in that area of my life. There's no expression that meets my significance, that exhausts my imagination. My imagination shows me something far beyond, but here I am accepting a meager type of outcome. So for me, one of the things, rather than aspiring to be glowing and elevated and levitating in life above, our unwanted experience or our lower experience that we may perceive we're having, because it's not true, but let's just say that was the case. Many of us look to, and this, for me, I kind of reference the 80s and the Richard Simmons, and it may be a bit before your time, but jumping around and, getting everyone positive. Everyone's got to be positive. And positivity is one of the things that has fueled, in a very architected way, has fueled mental health and this whole marketed term of, mental health or men's health and the other things that go to it. The nature to try to be positive, it denies the negative. The positive and the negative together is love. It's an appreciation for everything as it is. Your partner or anyone's partner, they've got some, some darkness within them, and so have we individually. We all do. To deny that would be crazy, but to deny that would be to deny myself. I mean, I've got a huge amount of, darkness that's there, but it's in the progression of my acceptance of it rather than my denial of it that allows me to be free from it. I might want to change that. I might be aware of it and how that causes me to act or react in certain times. But if I'm not aware of it, then I can become manipulated. If I'm not aware of it, then I become the result of other people's actions. And I live up to labels and certain roles that I play. So for me, in an activity, And it's something we do in a really introductory part of what we offer is something called the attention project. The first thing is to focus on the thing that is most traumatic or overwhelming in your life. Because I would say the things that are most overwhelming and traumatic in people's lives are the things that they have been dictated to or dominated by, but they've never actually curiously looked at it. What actually is it? How was it created? What did I do? And to be able to listen to yourself rather than to need someone with a certificate on their wall to tell you what all that means. Your liberation will come in your progression through it. People can tell you forever that you're amazing and you're great and you're brilliant, but not until you take those steps do you feel that fulfillment within yourself. So to be able to give yourself the audience and the space to actually, try this, document without doing anything beyond this. Just document and become very present without any deceits, without trying to sugarcoat it or go, but it's only because of that or it only happened because of this reason. What is the absolute reality and truth of the experience for you at this moment? Because once you come to accept the darkness within you as you perceive it, what you create is authentic light. That's lightness and light itself. For many of us, there's a synthetic light. And if we can start to perceive ourselves, we'll start to see that in many so-called or pseudo New Age spiritual practices, in the way in which they've been hijacked. Now, there's a great beauty and depth in things like the yogic practices and the Vedic practices and so many others that are there. But if someone teaches it in such a way that is manipulative or not true or authentic and pure in its own way in relevance to its own experience with nature around us, that's not their problem. That's our inability to not determine, our inability to consent to that. So if we want to create true and authentic light, we do that by liberating the darkness. And the more comfort that we find in stepping into the darkness, and we start to love that, eventually what happens is people go, I don't want to go into that. Oh, it's too hard. It's traumatic. I don't want to look at it anymore. I don't want to talk about it. It will continue to keep haunting you. You'll see it everywhere in anything, and you'll leave one job to go, I can't stand the people here, to go there, and suddenly those people are there again in different forms, and I can't stand women and then men, and, I don't like this, and suddenly they're all around you. But when you come to love the very thing that you oppose, it doesn't oppose you anymore. And I don't mean by just saying, hey, I'm going to be really positive. I'm just going to love this thing. You love it by coming to understand it. Whether it be your father, your mother, your brother, your neighbor, rather than all the energy that's tied up in, I can't stand that guy. He's just always on his blower, or he's always throwing stuff online. I think they're stealing our water, or, whatever it may be that we concoct in our heads about, the people around us. The truth is, if you spent a little bit of courage, a little bit of presence, and you went to that guy and said, hey, you know what? I don't understand why you do what you do. You get out. We went to a friend's place recently, and we were sitting there on a beautiful Saturday afternoon, and there was a guy sitting there with his whippersnipper and blower up on the roof, blowing the roof about 6 times. And at first it's like, oh, that's interesting. 3 hours later, when he's still going and then around the yard and then doing the same thing again, you realize there might not be something quite, at peace with that person. But, you sit there and you kind of ignore it. But you can sit there and let it build up and let it build up. And it'd be an uncomfortable conversation to go and speak to that person. Because how would you approach it? Because they probably don't know any different. But to go and have that, and to maybe that person's never been asked. Maybe that in all the obvious nature, they've never been aware of it. So when we have things in our life that we keep avoiding and walking around and stepping on eggshells or tiptoeing around, when we go to a place of, hey, I'd really love to understand why you do that. When we open our heart to it, we'll then find love in it, because I never saw that. I never realized that. And they become the magical stories of our own curiosity. And for many of us, we're like, nah, that person's that way, that's that. I'm not part of that. I've got to be here, stay in my lane, rather than recognizing you're always in every lane. But if you can find practice, and to me, it's primary. If we want to be able to sit in the magnificence of our soul, not just proclaim it as a statement, we've got to first become at ease with the devil and the darkness. And if we don't, we will never understand it. And then because we don't understand it, and this is back to a statement that is around a lot, is, know thy enemy. And it's not about knowing thy enemy so you can trip them up. It's that you come to understand that they're not your enemy. And ultimately, there's nothing to fight against. But there's a process you go through. And I would say, as a starting point is begin at just feeling how difficult it is to get a pen and paper and start, first of all, just identifying the thing in my life that is most overwhelming or traumatic for me. And then once I identify that, then go, well, where do I even start? What am I going to say? Like, this just sounds stupid. Why am I doing this? And then you start to realize how absent you are to such a big and significant part of your life, because this thing has taken up so much. I've got these amazing ideas, and the amount of people I speak to with such brilliant, phenomenal ideas about life and what they would like to bring. Even it might be a business of sorts. And you think, wow, why don't you do? Oh, well, I can't because of these. So if we allow ourselves to exercise our own demons, if we allow ourselves to do that, then we can have an experience with other people where we don't have to continually converse about our problems or the problems of the world around us.
Wow, that's huge, Jason. I really appreciate that perspective, and it really brings it back into that radical integration of full acceptance and full ownership, full self-responsibility. And I just wanted to acknowledge a couple of people tuning in here on the live. We got Sean, who says the same thing. If you don't own it, you can't change it. It's a beautiful little message. And we also got Melissa Wright tuning in. She says, go you. Bet it feels exhilarating to feel the fear and do it anyway. And it's kind of, these are little gold snippets of what people are taking away from what you're sharing, Jason. And it's great insight into exploring, the level of interaction that we have as human beings as an offering. I really like that perspective. He said that if we're not integrated and not in our alignment or in our integrity, then we will just agree to things that, we don't actually really want to be doing, but bringing it back in.
For sure.
And,
I was just going to say, we have to keep going into the unknown. I mean, that's what makes it as happy, right? It's, if you're going somewhere, you know what's going to happen, who's going to be there, how it's all going to play out, you're already bored before you get there. But when you go into a place, I don't know what's going to happen, but I feel uncomfortable. But, there's sometimes the greatest nights and experiences we have. But as much as we're having this conversation, and what I was just mentioning before, I just wanted to say, it doesn't have to be easy, but it's always simple. But the thing is, to start doing things is the most important part, because until we start, nothing will change. And we've got to be humble in the extent, the amount of mistakes I make each day, and, I have learnt over years now to laugh at myself rather than going, you idiot, why did you do that? How can you keep doing those things? But instead to laugh at the irony of it is really important. And a simple practice of just coming into your own space and looking at things that you don't enjoy that are taking up space in your life gives you an ability to start to release them. And that's what I would wish for everyone, is just start. Just give yourself, whether it's 5 minutes, 15 minutes, whether it's an hour. But for sure that there's more. I would say, if you're trying to fix things, that is a habit. It's not a reality. There's nothing to fix. But if you come to a place of understanding how to maintain your own space and how to do that consistently, I don't mean through meditation, I mean just through understanding that within yourself, then suddenly all of those things you thought you needed to fix, they're not there anymore. And they're the warm fuzzy blanket that we're shrouding ourselves in at times. We don't like them, we don't want them, but they're there and they're familiar. It's also to realize that how seductive, truly seductive and addictive familiarity is. We don't allow ourselves to, I had a guy today that was talking about a thing before that said about fear. Fear and freedom are exactly the same space. But for many of us, we want someone else to provide us a way to achieve that, to move past it, to move into it. That will never happen. Freedom is not something we gain. It is what we already are. It's the same as intuition. We don't learn intuition. We become aware of what is already there. And, this constant looking outside of ourselves for those answers, yes, that'll enrich our own experience of ourselves, but it always leads us back to what we already are. And I suppose it goes back to your first question when we're talking about what am I? The polar opposite of the what is the who. And the what question is only in relation to you. It's before human, it's before being, it's a consideration of a space that's unexplored. The who is in comparison, and this is the seduction of familiarity, is the who can only exist if there's other who's. And this is the very foundation and fabric of the limitations of the ego, because once you understand and embrace the ego is the most amazing capacity within each of us. If we don't understand how to navigate, again, we'll fight against it. But if we keep looking at who am I, it's going to be in comparison to that person, this person, the people I don't even know, but I observe and I assume as to what they are. The other part of the who is what we previously were or what we think we'll become. They are also very powerful aspects of what we compare ourselves to in the inability to accept us as we are. And ultimately, that's the end part of freedom, is our complete acceptance of ourselves. But yes, part of that journey is going to be undoing the knots that we've tied previously. And that's a really liberating one, because as soon as we shift that a little bit, the amount of vitality and energy that comes to you because you stop pushing against things, because you stop resisting things, people believe that energy that comes to them is like, wow, I just got this rush of energy that came to me. That's not anything that's gifted to you. That's just you consistently pushing by obligation and by habit through life. And as you keep pushing and pushing and pushing, and then you realize, oh, I don't need to do that anymore. Suddenly that vitality and energy is not directed to that thing you're pushing against. You start to receive that very thing that's coming within you. And suddenly you become enlivened by it, and look at the irony of, wow, I've been pushing against that all my life. No wonder I feel vital. No wonder I feel alive. No wonder I feel enthralled. It's because all I've been doing is pushing against the very thing that's coming into my space to adore me, to accept me, to receive me. And that's to me, that's a really important difference, is the capacity to embrace something as it is. We had a conversation on the page, and I don't know if you saw it, but it was about mosquitoes, because it's the time of year, and there's and the question was along the lines about, are mosquitoes, really biting you, or are you just experiencing your separation? And one of the things that comes is, it's the same as when we have feelings. When a feeling comes within us, it triggers sometimes a response. I don't like this, so then we suppress it, and there we go, pushing against it. So we have a feeling, which is then a physical reference point of what we determine to be a truth, because we placed our body as the point of reference. And that's okay, but our real intelligence is in the energetic state of awareness, when we're accessing the field of information that's always sitting there and available to us. But if we deny that and we go with the feeling, we start interacting with it. The feeling that's happening to us at times is the movement of energy from a place that was previously stagnant. When we allow energy to move to us and through us in a new way, as a new frequency comes into us because we've been resisting it our entire life, we're going to have different feelings. But the key is to not react to those feelings, but to understand it's just movement through me. It's not intelligence. It's not a fulfillment or an uprising. I already am fulfilled. I already risen. But if I keep working with the physical interactions, I will stick with psychology. I will stick with trying to clear belief systems. I will stick with trying to fix my life. I will stick with trying to understand neuroscience as explanation of why I'm experiencing this ball inside your head is overwhelmed already, maintaining the magnificence of what you are. Your intelligence is beyond that. And these are not separate things. It's just creating a space for that within your own self. And yes, I want to qualify, there's great wisdom in all of us. There is not wisdom in text. There is knowledge in that. How we interact with it becomes the wisdom, because how we then apply it. Wisdom is all to do with the expression and the action of what we've come to understand. What we know maintains a conversation, not a manifestation.
That's so good, Jason. I appreciate you sharing that, man. It's absolutely so true. And Melissa here agrees with us. She's saying, I absolutely hear your words. True freedom comes from within. It cannot be taken from us, nor even fought for us. It is a choice to be the calm in the chaos or the eye in the storm. Such potent transmissions there, Jason. I really appreciate your perspective on life and, the unraveling of realizing how magnificent each of us really are at our core and in our essence. And it's something that I love, unraveling with you and having these conversations. So I just wanted to, just remind the audience that we have had this conversation similar to this before, and it is available on the Facebook page or also on Earth Heroes TV. And we're excited because we're going to be unpacking more of these in conversations coming up in the next couple of weeks, ongoing. So I'd also be curious to hear from you guys who are watching right now, what it is that is resonating and feels in alignment with what Jason has shared today, and just write it in the comments for us. We do follow up with the comments, and we'd just love to hear from you, because we can integrate that into our next conversation and unpack it in these ways that, can really benefit and potentially serve you and help you on the journey to unlocking that wisdom that's within each of us, and just remembering that it's in coming back into full integration and full acceptance. So, Jason,
Can I just add one thing to that, Shay?
Absolutely.
I'd also encourage people, and in a real, invitation, is to also share what they think is absolutely ridiculous, what they think is, absolutely crazy, and we've fallen off off the cheese off the cracker or whatever, lost our marbles. Like, it's because I invite scrutiny in any form, and I love it because it allows one thing. When we become certain or confident in a particular area of life, it allows people to let go of their polarizations and the things that hold them back. I mean, I always reference someone like Donald Trump and how polarizing he is. It's, you look at that and it causes people to polarize themselves, but ultimately they're releasing such a toxicity within, whether they like him or not, it's irrelevant. But that particular individual, and even a Bill Gates and, anyone like that, is they're exposing themselves in what people might say is ridiculous, is crazy, is evil, is beautiful, whatever it may be. But the thing is, for us to be able to, express and allow in that moment just to trigger and let it out, doesn't mean that's what we are. That's ultimately what we're letting go of, that we haven't found the space of trust to be able to release. So I would, welcome scrutiny to say, look, what you're saying is crazy, and for this reason. It's not really going to help much just saying you're crazy. I've already acceptance of that and pretty weird and all the rest of it. But you're crazy because of this, or this concept is crazy. Allow it to be explored. And that's what I think is equally important in finding elevation, but also finding where that stuck little stuff is, that like you're an idiot. You don't, whatever it may be. It's I think it's really important to be able to, have a space for that, not just here, but imagine if your partner was able to allow you the freedom to speak what it was that was coming in the moment, so you didn't suppress that, but recognize when you were doing it, and they understood the function of a human being was as a point of release. That I can lose my shit, let's say, and that person that loves me most realizes, well, I know that's not true of you, but let it come out, let it be, and just go, all right, what's for dinner? What are we going to have? Rather than making the theatrics of it, because you leave it and you don't receive that gift in its own way, however it's presented, it sits with the person. But the ability to be able to speak that out loud is quite amazing. Oh, sorry, mate, I can't stop talking. But there's one thing I wanted to, within this, that is just, I shared with some people the other day. But there's a screening spot that I have, and I think it's a really interesting exercise for people to just try and do at times. And I go there with my son occasionally, but just to stand, sometimes even in your backyard, if you're living in a smaller location, to just belt out a scream like, is the ends of the earth is coming out of your mouth, is to allow that to happen, but just to feel how resistant you are to actually doing it because of what the neighbor might think, what these people, and that's bad, that's wrong for them. And it sounds easy, but to actually go and have a space to do that, and I would suggest to you, even if you went out in the middle of the bush in the middle of nowhere, there's still going to be those thoughts, what if someone's listening? What if someone hears me? And it's just to realize in that particular part how I don't allow my vitriol, how I don't allow my shit to come out, and do it a few times, have some fun with it. But I'm not saying it's a remedy of sorts. I'm saying it'll give you a bit of liberation and freedom. I'm not saying it's going to cause you to become all the things that you hope to become in your life, but it is also a point of reference to go, wow, geez, I can't even in that space. I'm not letting myself be heard. But yeah, be ridiculous, be crazy, and I would like to just say that as much as where this is coming through, and it might seem for some hitting the mark and others, way out there, is everyone goes through stuff in their life. Everyone experiences their own doubts and fears in an opportunity to meet them, to move through them. And sometimes we take an extra few steps to do that. People like myself and others have seen that in so many people, but provide an opportunity to be able to go through that, not again and again and again, but to find a way through it, because that's the very nature of, I suppose, what I have to humble myself to as part of my existence, because I started off doing things that were very different to this. And that's, it was mainly me hiding away in something that was safe, that was, that people would consider the right type of career for you.
Yeah, that's huge, man. I really appreciate that perspective, and also, the beautiful invitation to go out and be ridiculous, because it's a challenging thing to, go against the status quo and just do the normal everyday job or career or behavior, and just walk down the street as a normal citizen. But why not be our most beautiful, craziest, wildest, ridiculous self? And it's a nice place to be in that space, to have acceptance of that self that can be fully expressive and shout to the top of the rooftops, or just do something that is a little bit wild and outside the box, and take a risk. Yeah, have that initiative. Exactly.
No, mischief.
Mischief, yeah, a bit cheeky.
Yeah,
I love it, man. Just to wrap it up, I want to thank you, Jason, as well for sharing today, and thanks to everyone who's tuned in. We had a few questions and a few people joining us on the live, and yeah, just appreciate your time, man, and look forward to having more of these conversations in the very near future.
It's an absolute pleasure, Shay, and I love the space you create, and just the fun of it. It's really it's a pleasure to be here in simple terms.
Love it, man. We'll look forward to chatting to you soon. Bye for now, eh?
Thank you. Have a great one. See you all later.